language that you want to hear in, English, French, or the floor, which gives you both. And if you wish to speak, raise your hand. Thanks for your cooperation. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by committee on Monday, September 15, 2025, the committee will resume its study of anti-feminist ideology. Now, before we welcome our witnesses, I'd like to provide a trigger warning. We'll be discussing experiences related to violence and femicides. This may be triggering to viewers with similar experiences, and if any participants feel distressed or need help, please advise the clerk. And for all witnesses and all members of Parliament, it's important to recognize that these are difficult conversations, so let's try to be compassionate in all of our conversations. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. We have with us today Rachel Gilmore, a journalist, Bubble Pop Media, and from the Fédération des Femmes du Québec,
and from the Quebec Women's Association, Viv McCallion, Mobilization Coordinator.
And to help you out, you're going to have your 5-minute statements. When you have 1 minute left, you'll see the yellow card. When you have 30 seconds left, you will see the red card. And then at the end of your time, I will ever so gently say, and that's the end of your time. So with that, we'll start off and we'll go to Ms. Gilmore for 5 minutes.
Great. All right. So a few months back, I came across a research paper that I found deeply chilling. The study was published in June in the journal Gender and Education by Amelia Sandow and Luke Cousineau. And it was titled, quote, "Trying to Talk White Male Teenagers Off the Alt-Right Ledge and Other Impacts of Masculinist Influencers on Teachers." The researchers used data collected from the teachers subreddit community on reddit.com to dig into how those users described the influences of a resurging misogyny on the jobs of teachers and in the classrooms. It turns out teachers are being bombarded with the rhetoric these kids are learning from the worst men on the internet. The researchers found that students are actively parroting male supremacist rhetorics at school, and that is serving to devalue women teachers and make classrooms less safe. They found that it influences gender dynamics in the classroom to the point that a male faculty member said the way his female colleagues are treated makes him wonder if they're, quote, teaching in the same school. The teachers face degrading, awful comments from the boys in their class. A lot of it is terminology straight from the manosphere space, like boys calling all women and girls holes, and any boy who is kind to girls a simp. Beyond impacting the gender dynamics in their classrooms, the teachers also raised genuine safety concerns that arose because of the stuff these kids were consuming online. Here's what one teacher had to say about a student who had been influenced by manosphere influencer Andrew Tate. Quote, "I had a student write a paper in graphic detail about how SA victims, sexual assault victims, deserved it and all women were asking for it, and a lot of other extremely alarming sentiments. The paper topic was nowhere close to anything like this, but he wrote it anyway." The research went on to highlight different approaches the teachers had discussed for addressing this phenomenon, but it was clear that overall there was no consensus on what works. Beyond that, some administrators told teachers that approached them with concerns that boys will be boys. Despite everything I just described, the reason that I wanted to share this study and these anecdotes is because it gave me a very chilling, overarching realization, which is that these testimonies from teachers are akin to if you were standing on a beach and the water suddenly receded very quickly and very significantly. When that happens, it's an early warning sign of a tsunami. And that's how I felt about that study, because these boys are young right now. They're saying and doing these things in classrooms, but they're going to grow up and they're going to bring these ideologies into the broader world. That's why I am so glad that you're studying this issue of anti-feminist ideology, as thanks to a confluence of factors, including the advent of social media, incompetent moderation from tech giants, and manosphere influencers' creation of soft entry points for a more radical ideology. Academics I've spoken to have said that anti-feminist ideology is experiencing a resurgence because, unfortunately, it is nothing new. While experts like Luke Cousineau and Emily Sandow would be better placed to speak to the literature and studies on these topics, I can attest to some of the real-life experiences of encountering this ideology. As someone who exists prominently online as an outspoken woman, I often intersect with these virulently anti-feminist spaces and ideologies. That means, unfortunately, I have had firsthand interactions with the vicious misogyny these ideologies make manifest. Often, the white nationalists I cover who spew racist and transphobic vitriol don't have the kindest words for women either. As a female journalist who exposes them, I've therefore found myself on the receiving end of that hate. Harassers have engaged in softer tactics like mocking my voice and turns of phrases to dismiss my work. They swarm whenever I receive career opportunities, spreading often unspecific and gendered attacks against my character, hoping to intimidate those who would think to offer me such opportunities in the future. At times, like with respect to a CTV fact-checking job, it works. In fact, after my last committee appearance, the manner in which I spoke was mocked by several of these same voices as evidence that I was unqualified for the honor of testifying before Parliament. If you're uncomfortable hearing some of these stories, like the time that a man photoshopped semen on my face and circulated it around the internet, you can only imagine how uncomfortable it is to live this. So I am very glad that, once again, you guys are studying this, and I can only hope that I'll be of some service today in helping to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we'll turn to Ms. McCallion for 5 minutes, please.
Oui. Donc,
Thank you for having me today. I'll get down to business right away. Anti-feminism isn't an opinion. It's not irritation faced with women's progress. It's one of the fastest growing extremist ideologies in the West, and it's a concrete threat to public security, social cohesion, and our democratic institutions. Research is very clear. A study on 28 million messages in the manosphere shows accelerated radicalization. In 10 years, the number of messages published in these communities more than doubled. Researchers have seen a considerable increase in violent words and attacks against women. In some incel communities, the proportion of messages that were openly hostile to men increased by more than 60% after 2016. The most violent communities grow the fastest. Users leave moderate spaces to join the most extreme groups. Radicalization is not an accident. It's the dominant trajectory of the manosphere. And these ideologies do not stay online. Since 2014, attacks committed in the name of incel ideology have caused at least 89 deaths, 15 in Canada. That makes our country the second most affected place in the world by ideological misogyny. One of the most serious recent examples was the 2018 Toronto mass murder. That wasn't an isolated incident. It's representative of a larger movement where hatred of women becomes an explicit motor of violence. We must take this seriously. These aren't isolated incidents. These assailants explicitly claim a structured ideology fed by online spaces where hatred against women is a political act. Research also shows that each interaction in the manosphere makes users more aggressive and more open to extremist discourse of all kinds. Hatred towards women isn't a trivial symptom. For many, it's the beginning of their radicalization. In parallel with this explicit radicalization, there's another worrying phenomenon. Anti-feminism is being normalized, and it's being expressed in an unabashed manner. Research show that it's more and more seen as reasonable or funny. We're talking about a crisis of masculinity, and we're calling feminist progress into question. In a context of generalized social malaise and economic crises, these ideas take root. Maybe they don't directly support violence, but they make them seem acceptable. Finally, it's key to acknowledge that there's also structural anti-feminism. Some public policy can disproportionately impact women, especially those who are racialized, Muslim, migrant, or living in a precarious situation. One example are the recent secularism laws that limit access to jobs for women who wear religious symbols and diminish their social and professional mobility. Think about Bill C-12. That has a direct impact on the safety and protection of migrant and asylum claimant women. When the state weakens the ability of some women to participate in society fully, it contributes to institutional anti-feminism. And that structural anti-feminism feeds violent ideology in turn. Discriminatory policies validate misogynist discourse, and those discourse justify those policies. So it's a vicious circle. The red flags are very clear, and it's going to be dangerous if we don't act now. Anti-feminism is an extremist ideology based on gender, and that weakens democracy because it questions the equality of the members of society and reduces women's participation in public life. Today, it's a gateway to forms of extremism that directly threaten national security. It increases other forms of hatred, and it's broadcast to the young faster than our preventative measures can reach them. We don't have the luxury of turning a blind eye. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, et nous allons commencer.
Thank you, and now we'll start with Madame Vian for 6 minutes. Thank you for being here this afternoon. We're very happy to have you. This subject is close to our hearts. We're all horrified by what we're hearing and seeing regarding anti-feminism. Last year, over 100 women were killed in Canada last year. A woman is killed every 2 days in this country. It's very worrying. Ms. McCallion, you seem quite pessimistic regarding the situation. I know you're very worried about the situation. And you're talking about a political act. What do you mean exactly by that? You said that anti-feminism is a political act. Yes. For men in the manosphere, it becomes a political act. For them, they're exercising their democratic right to express themselves and being in society as an anti-feminist. It's a political identity. Those boys and men use that as a political identity to defend their right to participate in society. Tell me, we've spoken quite a bit about education here and in other studies. Education always comes to the forefront. There was a study that said we really need to target young boys. What should we do? What do you recommend that we do? Or put forward in order to help these young men in order to put them on a very different trajectory? More prevention is necessary. We need to give people on the ground more tools. For instance, prevention, there needs to be popular education. People on the ground, like teachers, need to be equipped to do so. We also need to equip parents. Parents have a role in this situation, a duty. We have to ask parents to get interested in what their boys are doing, not just confront them, but get interested in the universe that they're in, because, you know, the manosphere is 2 clicks away in the algorithm, and we've completely lost control. Boys look at something on their telephone, on their phone, on weightlifting, and then it turns into anti-feminist content. So parents and adults really need to get involved in a real way in what those young boys are doing and what they're watching. I myself am overwhelmed by technology. I'm very comfortable with technology, and parents can have difficulty following it. We've heard from teachers. We've heard that teachers are totally overwhelmed by what's happening in classrooms. Yes, absolutely. There was a recent study that showed, and so they asked the question. It was undertaken by OGRI, an organization on sexual diversity. The study asked boys, if your sister was a lesbian, what would you do? And many boys added an answer to say that they'd kill their sister if she told them that they were lesbian. Many added that on. That's what the research showed. And it just came out. So there's an increase of that kind of discourse, and that's what my colleague said in her opening remarks. Mrs. Gilmore, I don't want to give him free advertising, but someone came the other day and said that every time this person is online or shown, the number of clicks, the number of people who follow him goes up significantly. Tout le monde en parle had that person. I don't know if you know that show. It's a popular Quebec TV show. Openly, should we talk to those kinds of people? Should we give them a platform? Because they've had quite a large platform. I think that if we're going to talk to those people, we need to do it in a responsible way. We have to do it in a way where we ask hard questions about their ideas. I wasn't in the room when they decided to invite this person, but if I had been a host on Tout le monde en parle, I probably would not have invited that man. But if you're in a situation where these men have platforms, we must ask hard questions. Ask hard questions on the concepts that they're sharing. We don't have much time, but here we're looking for solutions and recommendations. Madame Michelin, you talked about prevention. Do you have any other recommendations for us? Of course. You have to fund feminist groups to do research so they can have more data in order to justify acts on the ground. That's something the government can do, and that would really help us.
Going to Ms. Khalid for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Much appreciated all of your work in this space. I'll start with Ms. Gilmore. Ms. Gilmore, when we talk about anti-feminist ideology and indoctrination by, and it's an organization or organized in a certain way, who are the they? Who is organizing all of this?
Well, there's a lot of money in it. And it's not necessarily organized always in the sense that there's a traditional structure to it. But, you can argue that the profit model and incentive structure that's created through social media and through the ways in which these figures can take advantage of creative ways of achieving virality is sort of the institutional structure that creates an atmosphere where these people can thrive. And, Andrew Tate's a great example where he was actually deplatformed initially, but he's been able to thrive despite that because he told his followers, when I'm deplatformed, take my clips and post them everywhere. He gave his followers permission to do that, and he encouraged them to do that, so that actually there was this sort of perverse reaction that ended up happening where when he was deplatformed, he exploded even more. So, but the they is, these tech platforms, the alt media, there's all kinds of alternative platforms that when an individual is deplatformed from a more mainstream one, still allows them to reach an audience. I wouldn't say it's organized in a traditional sense, but there's absolutely a lot of different hands in the pot here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, you spoke about Andrew Tate, and there are many others that are like him. What makes young people so vulnerable to be so susceptible to that message, do you think?
I asked an academic who studies these issues that exact question about Andrew Tate on my podcast not long ago. And what he told me is that a lot of these young people, young men, want someone to tell them how to be a man in this society. And guys like Andrew Tate claim to have an answer to that. And they also package their content in such a way that it's very difficult to navigate some of the moderation, because when he's just doing his, fighter bodybuilding stuff, that isn't the kind of thing that you can take down. But it's a soft entry point that eventually leads these people who are consuming fitness content, as you mentioned earlier, to this pipeline towards this deeper radicalization. So I think that it's difficult because the fact that these guys exist and present themselves as role models for those young men on how to be men is something that we really need to have a counterbalance to. And frankly, I think we need to disrupt the notion that this is in any way what manhood is.
Are you implying that
anybody who's into
these
MMA?
Influencers or role models, quote unquote, take the vulnerability of young men to make money for themselves?
Definitely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. All of this is a grift. Like, these are not, I mean, some of them are ideologues, sure, but there's a lot of people who have figured out that there's a ton of money in exploiting people's fear, their insecurity, their, it's a scary world. It's overwhelming.
Have you ever watched the news?
And there is a lot of money that you can make in telling people that you have all the answers and how they should live, and can help them to get the girls, to get the money, to get the fast cars. And it's disgusting to me, because there are real problems in this world that need to be addressed, but nothing that Andrew Tate offers will provide that redress.
Thank you. Ms. McKeown, do you want to comment on that?
Deep-rooted hatred.
J'ajouterais que
I'd add that we're living in a world with a lot of instability. The cost of living is going up. The prospects for young people are going down. It's hard to buy a house. The environment is catching fire. So young people are vulnerable. It's a good time for these influencers to seek out their attention, because the distress that youth are experiencing is real and justified. We have to get interested in that distress because there's something real there. The solutions that they're getting is an easy solution, and it seems to give them a response to everything. But we need to get involved as well.
So here's the dichotomy for me here, is that, over my entire life, I don't recall women being given the accommodation of saying, oh, these are the reasons why this young woman or this girl is feeling the way that she is, right? And yet here we are having a whole study on why young men and boys are feeling the way that they are and are being indoctrinated the way that they are. So we are all, I think, agents of our own choices. So where is that balance between providing prevention support to young boys and men and holding them accountable for the shitty actions that they are taking oftentimes?
I think it's important not to coddle them by acting like, young men are in a specific crisis that young people, period, aren't facing. I mean, income inequality is at a record high in Canada, and that is the precursor to a lot of the feelings of vulnerability and insecurity that young people, period, are dealing with. It just so happens that a lot of these young men are being targeted by grifters that are profiting off of the specific ways in which that insecurity manifests itself among young men. But I think that it's unhelpful to act as though the root issues are inherently unique to the lived experiences of young men, when so much of this is a societal issue.
Thank you. Madame Larouche, vous avez la parole pour 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to our witnesses for being with us today. This study looks into the precursor reasons to femicides and violence against women. The rise of anti-feminism and masculinism, unfortunately, inevitably leads to a rise in violence against women. First, Madame Gilmore, you're a journalist.
No, she's not.
And maybe Madame Michaelian, maybe you'll have something to add.
This
We've
is
talked a lot about the
but
problematic role of the media and the role of disinformation and misinformation in this file of radicalization is considerable. As Marie-Ève Carignan, a researcher, said, in parallel, if the media crisis means we'll lose a diversity of media voices, for instance, losing community media, private media. So there's a media crisis created by the GAFAM. So Google, Apple, Facebook, those big platforms. What's the link between having a diversity of media voices to avoid disinformation and misinformation, and what role can the federal government play?
C'est essentiel.
It is key to have a diversity of opinions and voices in media. It's especially key to have local journalism. It's key in multiple aspects of society. It's important to have a report on city councils and that kind of organization where there are issues. And without local media, we would never know how to deal with those issues or talk about those real community issues. If we don't have the real facts on societal issues, people will look for someone to blame for their problems. Many people, as we've touched on, profit off giving those answers and profit off saying, here's who you should blame. Having a diversity of media, having a strong media, a media with enough money, well, that's where the government can help. There can be a counterbalance to those problematic people. Madame Michaelian, do you have anything to add? We also need media to get interested in what community groups are doing on the ground. That's where the expertise is. We're the ones with the expertise on the ground. So maybe you need to harmonize what the media is covering and what we're doing. A few more questions for you, Madame Michaelian. Another researcher last week came to speak. His name was David Morin. There's a fine line between freedom of expression if there's to be a law on online hate speech. Another research talked about the importance of legislating on cyber violence. That's the federal government's responsibility because it concerns the criminal code. To what extent is it key to have tools for intervention when things go too far? Response. It's certainly important, and it's a great step forward that is putting that kind of law in place. However, if we keep always being in reaction instead of in prevention, we won't get out of this crisis. Violence will go up anyways. We can't put all those people in prison. We can't just arrest all those people. We have to do prevention. It's a continuum, that's what we've heard, and we have to work upstream and we need more tools to send a strong message. There are limits. We need to work in education, but those who commit violent acts, well, there will be consequences. Madame Gilmore, do you have anything to add regarding cyber violence? I just had a thought on what you mentioned. In my personal experience, I get a lot of death threats, rape threats. What I've found in my experience with the law is that it's always reacting. Even when there are threats, they don't do much when it's online. They say, oh, there are too many people online, it's too hard to investigate, we don't really have a solution. I just wanted to say that it's really important to be preventative instead of reactive regarding these issues, because I have to change my way to live every day.
To our second round, and we'll go to Ms. Roberts for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for attending our meeting. Very interesting conversation. I have a question for both of you. With the rise of intimate partner violence up 76%, do you agree that the laws need to be tightened so that we can protect women?
An incredibly vague question. Do you have specifics?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. We have a family that had a bond put against their daughter's partner, who was out on bail, not once, not twice, 3 times, and eventually killed her, shot her 4 times, once in the eye. My question is, how do we protect innocent women against men that instill violence? Do you not think that he should have been kept behind bars?
I mean, sorry. I was just going to say that, so are you specifically asking about tightening bail laws?
Yes.
Is that specifically?
Yes.
Okay. Because in the context of bail laws, I think that while there are aspects of the bail system that need reform. The bail system, currently in Ontario, I don't have the figures handy in my head right now, but my understanding is that there are more legally innocent people currently incarcerated than there are who have gone through the justice system and been found guilty and been incarcerated. So I'm not sure that just putting more people in the carceral system in that respect is necessarily the answer, but there are a lot of people who are more qualified to speak to the aspects of, tightening the bail system or not than me. But I will say that the ways in which it's broken aren't necessarily going to be solved by just, arresting more people and putting more legally innocent people behind bars.
Oui, puis encore une fois, c'est réactionnaire.
What did I just hear?
Once again, we're reacting after the fact, so we need to put things in place upstream so that doesn't happen. We also talk about coercive control. We need laws on coercive control. It must be recognized. The continuum of violence isn't just hitting people or murders. There's a whole pattern beforehand of economic, psychological violence. A woman won't even feel comfortable leaving her relationship, and she won't even feel comfortable seeking help from the authorities. We also know that the authorities often victimize women. Women don't feel comfortable. Women feel denigrated often by the justice system. So there are so many things to put in place upstream before getting to that extreme solution of putting more people behind bars.
My concern is that we've studied IPV, and that the rates have gone up 76%. And I know that in my community, I've been approached by several parents who have lost children, women, to this violence. And I understand that we have to educate. We have to prevent. I get that, which is great. I have a son, I have a daughter, and I treat them both equally, and I've treated them that they need to treat everyone, irregardless, with respect. But you're going to get to the point where sometimes in our culture, it doesn't, for example, individuals coming from other cultures don't understand our laws, and they're not being able to protect themselves. We had a witness in here who came from a different culture where men have the opportunity to be the dominant individual. And unfortunately, her family felt that that was okay, the abuse was okay. We need to stop that. So you're talking about education. How do we educate women coming here? I work with a group in York Region where they try and educate them to the law so that they can be better protected. So if we don't educate them before they come here and terrorize our women, how are we going to protect them?
I mean, there's plenty of men here who terrorize women. I'm not sure
I
why we're
understand
specifically isolating.
And I
men
understand
coming
that.
here
I'm not
and terrorizing
isolating
our
it.
women.
I'm not isolating it.
Okay.
I'm saying that
She
it's
gave you a specific
it's something
example.
that has to start from the home, that we understand that we, as I'm a mother, and I've always said to my son, you need to treat every individual with the respect that they deserve if you want that respect back. So if we can teach our men that women are just as important as men, then we have a better society. Then we have a more opportunity to be equal. Do you agree?
L'affaire, c'est que, comme ma collègue disait,
Here's the thing. As my colleague said, the problem doesn't repose upon one social group rather than the others. It's not that immigrant men are more violent than white men. We need to give women access to services. Immigrant women don't have access to services. They don't feel taken seriously in civil society. They feel rejected by civil society, and they don't feel comfortable seeking out the help that they need. So give them access to that help. Make it even easier for them to have access to that help and include them as much as possible in society. I think that's how we can protect women.
C'est la fin de votre temps.
That's the end of your time. Now, Madame Menard, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. We value your time here. We've had many witnesses, and every witness has shed more light on the issue. Madam Gilmore, you're a journalist. You've worked for different media. Now you're an independent journalist. You're a visible media presence. Journalism is fact-based, and it is a way to protect our democracy. The fact that you're a woman journalist who works with facts, you're exposed to violence online. What impact can that have on the rest of society? Women and girls are harassed every day online. When you have such a big following, what can that show in terms of a dynamic? I think I'll respond in English.
Yeah, I mean, I worry constantly about the impact that seeing the vitriol that I face has on young women who are watching and following my journalism. It is one of the things that makes me the most sad, because I never want anyone, I want to inspire young women. I don't want them to see what I'm going through and think, oh, you know what, I couldn't live with that. I couldn't do that. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's easy. I've had to change how I live my life. There's things that I cannot do that I used to do.
Quoi?
Like when I have friends over, I tell them that they can't take any photos that show out of my windows. I'm very cautious about sharing live locations when I'm moving around. I used to go out dancing sometimes, maybe have a couple drinks. Now I'm usually in bed early and rarely have more than 2 drinks, just because I'm afraid of being in any way out of control in public, lest one of my harassers or the men who have threatened me show up in person. It's even impacted my partner's a musician, and I've had individuals show up at his concerts to film me and harass me, and so I even have to be cautious sharing that part of my life, and if I'm ever moving around. So there's tons that I have to do, and it's very unpleasant. I'm not sure if you had another question or if you wanted me to speak to the issue of the.
en fait, l'expérience que vous racontez,
The experience you're describing at the moment can lead us to believe that can dissuade young women from pursuing a career as a journalist or expressing themselves in public space.
Yeah, it's like there are going to be young women who see my experience and choose not to go into the profession that I am in, which breaks my heart. And I think it's why people do this. I think it's why I deal with the harassment I deal with, in part because people want there to be fewer voices that aren't straight white men in journalism. And, I tick most of those privilege boxes in general, but it's just, I do think that there is a desire to silence people doing journalism in the way that I'm doing it, and the fact that I'm an outspoken young woman and, well, youngish. And, I just think that it's devastating to think of that. And that's why I also try to project strength and show that this isn't stopping me, and that if they ever choose to go into journalism, that there is a whole community of women who will have their back. But there are a lot of men trying to make it scary.
Mesdames, ma prochaine question.
Of women who will have their back, but there are a lot of men trying to make it scary.
Mesdames, ma prochaine question s'adresse.
My next question is for both of you. You're both present online. Hashtags, aggregating communities. In anti-feminism, what can you tell us about what we're observing on hashtags specifically? I don't know if it's hashtags that are really the problem. I think it's that these communities are formed not in mainstream media. They're more on Reddit, for instance, that kind of community. So people will use the hashtag to find a community, a group that talks about certain subjects. And that's kind of their home, their online home. So it's not so much on mainstream media. Mainstream media they'll attack people like my colleague here, but the nitty-gritty of the issue is really on, let's say, parallel channels. Thank you very much. Now, Madame LaRouche, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Once again, thank you very much, Rachel Gilmore and Vay McKellian. Madam Gilmore, it's not just in journalism that women don't want to get involved. In politician, there's been a backslide in terms of women in politics. Some women don't want to get involved because they don't want to expose their children to that violence. In any case, I'm convinced that something's not talked about enough. Now I'm talking about what we can do in the federal government. That's why I asked you about the criminal code. Helping media, that's within the federal government's purview. That's something that we can act on. Another thing that's under the purview of the federal government, and Madam McKellian, you mentioned it, are the federal government's policies and foreign policy. This morning I met Afghan women. Their message was, Canada must continue to be a leader, but we're worried. It's worrying to say that Canadian foreign policy is no longer feminist. Can you speak to the importance of that message? It sends the worst message possible. It's also the importance of applying the gender-based analysis plus in all laws. That must be at the heart of laws. Otherwise, we'll let people will fall to the wayside. And when marginalized or minority groups are attacked, well, we're hurting everyone's rights, and one day women's rights will be hurt. We're not safe from our rights being diminished. We have to think about it with an intersectional lens. Thank you. Now, Madame Vien, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll share an anecdote. I was trained as a journalist, and I worked as a journalist. I'm obviously not a journalist now because now I'm an MP, and I'm also from community journalism. When I was a journalist, I experienced reprisals because some people didn't like what I was doing. And so it's nothing new. It's not easy. That's my anecdote. All that to say, it's positive to have women and girls in journalism and other women and girls who get involved in politics and advance the women's rights. The other day, I pronounced a speech on Polytechnique, the Polytechnique tragedy. I don't know how many people talked about that speech this weekend. That's what I'm trying to say. Everyone can do their part. I don't have much time. Madame McCallion, earlier you said we need to fund feminist organizations more. Does your organization get federal funding? Response, yes, on some projects. We have an internship project that's funded by the federal government, but that's not where our main funding comes from. We're worried. In the department plan, cuts could come into effect. Does that worry you? Yes, absolutely. But without public funding, there are fewer opportunities for us. There's less opportunities to have resources to do our work. Our work, which is seeking out the knowledge we need to fight our fight. Earlier you talked about coercive control. I'd just like to reassure you on one thing. Women around the table are asking the Canadian government to fast-track legislation, a bill called C-332, that will criminalize coercive control, but it died on the order paper. But it was unanimous in the House. Now it's in the Senate, but it died on the order paper. So criminalizing coercive control is the thing to do. Yes? Yes. I don't have an official position from my organization regarding criminalizing coercive control. But personally, yes. That needs to be legislated. Because at the moment, there are violent actions that aren't considered violent actions. Yes, it's a gray area. In the day-to-day basis, some people don't know what coercive control is, and they must be trained, and we must do awareness raising. Another subject. There's a group called Partage au Masculin from Beauce. I would invite you to contact them. They take angry men and who are mad at everybody, especially mad at women, and are overwhelmed, and they take those men and they support them. They also have links with women's groups in order to put women and men together so they learn to have a dialogue and respect each other. At your organization, is that something that you can do since you're a strong organization in Quebec? Is that something that you've developed or thought of? Working with men groups? I'll admit no, and sometimes I wonder, they do it in Beauce in any case for several years, I see. But sometimes it comes to me, I think of the amount of resources we need to put in place just so a woman isn't murdered. No, that's not something we do, but it's certainly a complex issue that needs to be attacked from multiple angles, including prevention, and that could be part of it. Men being feminists is always good. I'd like to hear you talk more about the fact that the state weakens women's involvement in public space. Could you speak to that? For instance, when we prevent women, why does the state prevent women from participating in public? Well, we're preventing women from teaching because they wear the veil. Well, that's a way of preventing them from fully participating in civil society.
So now we're going to go to Ms. Nathan for the last 5 minutes of this panel.
Thank God. It's almost over.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank God.
Thank you, both of you, for being here and able to share your personal experiences as well. I wanted to ask V, is that how you say your name? Okay, Ms. McKinnon. we've observed political leaders deliberately targeting new immigrants, especially Muslim women. And also we've seen political leaders specifically targeting queer communities or particularly trans people by claiming they have only recognized two genders. Can you explain the implications of these messages? Who are they trying to appeal to and why they might be using this approach? And is it working, or what other communities are affected by it, especially young women?
Donc, juste m'assurer que j'ai...
I just want to make sure I've
my
well
ears.
understood your question. You want to know how policies that are transphobic can impact society and anti-feminism?
And specifically being vocal about this, because they're usually seen as community leaders, like leaders talking about this. So.
Je veux dire, les groupes des personnes trans,
Well, for trans people and non-binary people, they're being attacked continually. And I think that's within the context of the rise of the right and the rise of radical right-wing discourse. And those are marginalized groups that are trying to live their lives with dignity. I can't speak from experience, but there's been a lot of increase of violence towards those groups. Just today in the media, I saw that schools in Quebec will prevent teachers from being called other than Mr. or Mrs. So we're telling young people that gender is binary, they're only men or women, and we won't respect someone. We won't allow them dignity if they want to be called in a different way because they identify in a different way. So we're saying that masculinist and transphobic discourse is correct. And we're doing it in front of our young people. So yes, it's very worrying when political leaders have that kind of discourse.
And I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I know you've been harassed yourself. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've been horrified seeing the virulent transphobic rhetoric that has been spread through society. I mean, even some politicians in our House of Commons have been saying disturbing things that have gotten them condemned by Egal Canada and other organizations. I mean, Pierre Poilievre's comments about trans folks have been egregious, saying that he's only aware of two genders. And I think that one of the massive issues within this is you're ultimately not only all of our rights are intertwined, and when you adjudicate the presentation of gender for, say, going to the bathroom, what you are doing is adjudicating who is going to be harassed in that bathroom. I'm a 6-foot-tall woman. If I go pee and there's a bathroom ban, are people going to speculate about my genitalia? Am I going to be harassed when I'm just trying to use the washroom? Anyone who doesn't present in a very effeminate way is going to face questions and harassment. They are open to that. So it's not only rigorously enforcing, the forms of gender expression that exist in our society, but also, even among cis women, they are going to be harassed for this. So all of our rights are intertwined, and it is essential that we fight for all of them.
Can you talk a little bit about the DEI movement, the anti-DEI movement, and how that is affecting women in general, especially young women?
Anti-DEI is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. You're opposing diversity and equity and inclusion. Why? What is wrong with any of those things? I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how DEI operates in Canada as well. We tend not to use quotas, which is the aspect that is often attacked as, privileging certain groups over others. What we tend to do is just do audits of workplaces to ensure that everyone is having equality of opportunity. And I think that to attack these notions is a dog whistle to the worst elements of society that are seeing us slide towards a more fascistic world, and every politician who engages in that should be ashamed of themselves.
I'm so sorry, but that's the end of our time for today.
thank
We got a bit of a
God.
late
It's
start
over.
with the votes, but I want to thank our witnesses. Thank you for being so open and sharing
thank
freely
God.
with the committee. We really value that. Now I'm going to suspend briefly while we switch up for the next panel. Thanks.
Okay, that's it. That's the hour. We're done. We don't have to watch any more of that bullshit. Holy fuck. Oh, God. I'm not going to lie, Chris. That was a pretty good laugh. That was pretty good. Oh, man. All right, so we got Ogo tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. We've got the Stellantis issue. So we are going to call it for tonight, and then we've got question period at 2, and I haven't checked to see what's on in the afternoon, but I'll do that. But we're definitely live tomorrow at 11 a.m. for Ogo. So, yeah. I want my time back. Oh, that was awful. That was god-awful. Okay, well, I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Thanks for tuning into this shit show. That was the worst stream I think I've ever had that I've ever covered. Oh, man. Okay. Anyway, see you guys tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching, I guess. I don't know. See you guys.